The sound of shattering crystal silenced the entire ballroom. 500 of New York's elite froze, their eyes locking onto the pregnant woman standing amidst the shards of a champagne flute, trembling in a dress that cost less than the appetizers. Her husband didn't check if she was hurt. He didn't offer a hand. He laughed. He pointed a finger at her and called her a clumsy mistake, a stain on his perfect night. He thought he was shedding dead weight to climb the corporate ladder. He didn't know that the 3 men stepping out of the blacked-out helicopter on the roof weren't just billionaires. They were her brothers, and they were coming for blood. The rain in Manhattan wasn't cleaning the streets. It was just making the grime slicker. Inside the least charcoal BMW 5 Series, the air conditioning was blasting, despite it being a chilly October evening. Gavin Reynolds adjusted the vents so they hit his face directly, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "Can you please turn it down?" Clara asked softly from the passenger seat. She shifted her weight, trying to find a comfortable position. At 8 months pregnant, her ankles were swollen to the size of grapefruits, and the cheap polyester blend of her maternity dress was itching her skin. "I'm freezing. Gavin!" "Don't touch it," Gavin snapped, not looking at her. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror for the 10th time, smoothing an imaginary hair out of place on his gelled undercut. "I'm sweating bullets here. Tonight has to be perfect. Do you understand perfect?" Clara pulled her pashmina tighter around her shoulders. It was old, a thrift store find from her college days, and it had a small snag near the hem that she had tried to hide by folding it over. "I know. Gavin. The merger. You've told me. The merger." Gavin let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "It's not just a merger. Clara, it's the ascension. If I impress Harrison Vance tonight, if I can just get 10 minutes of FaceTime with the board of the Obsidian Group, I'm not just a senior VP anymore. I'm a partner. I'm made." He glanced over at her then, his eyes raking over her form with a mixture of disappointment and irritation. The streetlights flickered over her face, pale, weary, with dark circles she hadn't managed to cover with drugstore concealer. "God, look at you," he muttered. Clara flinched. "What? That dress? I told you to buy the red one I sent you the link for." "That dress was $600. Gavin," Clara said, her voice trembling slightly. "We have the baby coming. The nursery isn't even finished. We can't afford—" "I can't afford to look like I'm married to a charity case," he shouted, hitting the steering wheel. The car swerved slightly, and Clara instinctively grabbed the handle above the door. "Image is currency." "Clara, how many times do I have to teach you this? You walk in there looking like a suburban housewife who got lost on the way to Target." Clara looked out the window to hide the tears welling in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I tried my best with what we have." "That's the problem," Gavin hissed as he turned the car onto 5th Avenue, the Pierre Hotel looming ahead like a fortress of gold and stone. "Your best isn't good enough for where I'm going. You're small time. Clara, you've always been small time. I'm dragging you up this mountain, and you're just dead weight." The cruelty of his words hung in the air, heavier than the humidity. Clara remembered the man she had married 3 years ago. Gavin had been ambitious then. Yes. But he had been kind. He had loved her quiet nature, her love for painting, her simple dreams of a family. But as he climbed the ranks at his firm, surrounded by men with summer homes in the Hamptons and wives who treated plastic surgery like a dentist appointment, he had changed. He had become hungry, and that hunger was consuming everything, including them. Just try not to embarrass me, Gavin said, as he pulled into the line of limousines and Bentleys waiting for the valet. Don't talk about your Etsy shop. Don't talk about your grandmother's pie recipes. In fact, just don't talk. Stand there, smile, hold a sparkling water, and let me do the work. I'm your wife, Gavin, not a prop, Clara whispered. Tonight, he said, putting the car in park and unlocking the doors. You're barely even that. The valet, a young man in a sharp red vest, opened Gavin's door. Gavin stepped out, instantly transforming. The scowl vanished, replaced by a winning $1,000,000 smile. He buttoned his suit jacket, a knockoff Armani he had tailored to look real, and strode around the car. He didn't open Clara's door. The valet did. Clara struggled to get out, the weight of the baby making her movements slow and awkward. She reached out a hand for support, but Gavin was already 3 steps ahead, adjusting his cuffs, scanning the entrance for anyone important. He didn't look back. Clara took the valet's hand, offering a grateful, tired smile. Thank you, she said softly. Careful, Ma'am. The pavement is slippery, the valet said kindly. She straightened her dress, tugging at the hem, and looked at Gavin's back. He was already ascending the red-carpeted stairs, moving toward the golden revolving doors of the Pierre. She took a deep breath, placing a protective hand over her belly. Just get through tonight, she told herself. Just get through tonight, and maybe tomorrow he'll be him again. But as she walked up the stairs, the cold wind biting through her thin shawl, she had a sinking feeling that the man she loved was already gone. The Pierre's grand ballroom was a sensory overload of wealth. The air smelled of expensive perfume, Santal 33 and Baccarat Rouge 540, mixed with the scent of fresh white lilies that adorned every table in massive crystal vases. A live orchestra played a soft, jazz-infused version of Vivaldi in the corner. Clara felt instantly claustrophobic. The room was packed with the apex predators of New York society. Women in couture gowns that cost more than a car glided across the floor, their jewelry catching the light of the massive chandeliers. Men in bespoke tuxedos huddled in circles, discussing mergers, acquisitions, and summering in Saint-Tropez. Gavin had already vanished. Clara stood near the entrance, clutching her purse, feeling the familiar sting of abandonment. She scanned the room and finally spotted him near the bar. He was laughing too loudly, leaning in close to a tall, striking woman in a backless emerald silk dress. It was Tiffany Street, Claire, the daughter of Gavin's boss. Tiffany was everything Clara wasn't: sharp, angular, wealthy, and cruel. She had made it clear at the last Christmas party that she found Gavin amusingly desperate, which Gavin had interpreted as flirting. Clara navigated the crowd, muttering apologies as her baby bump bumped into people. When she finally reached Gavin, he was in the middle of a story. So I told him, if you want the portfolio to grow, you have to cut the dead wood. It's nature. Survival of the fittest, Gavin said, gesturing with his Scotch glass. Tiffany swirled her martini, looking bored. Her eyes flicked to Clara, and a small, malicious smile played on her lips. Speaking of dead wood, she drawled, look who waddled in. Gavin froze. He turned, his eyes narrowing as he saw Clara. I thought you were getting a drink, he lied smoothly, though his jaw was tight. I just got here. Gavin, Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. Hello, Tiffany. Tiffany looked Clara up and down, her gaze lingering on the sensible, comfortable heels Clara was wearing. Cute shoes, Clara. Very sensible. My grandmother wears a pair just like those for her water aerobics. Gavin let out a short, nervous chuckle. She has to prioritize comfort right now. Tiff, you know how it is. I really don't, Tiffany said, turning her back to Clara to face Gavin completely. So, Gavin, Daddy is in the VIP lounge, the gold room. He's with the investors from Dubai. Gavin's eyes lit up. This was it, the inner sanctum. Access to the gold room was strictly invitation only. Is he... do you think... I could get you in, Tiffany said, running a finger along the rim of her glass. But it's a tight space. Exclusive. No plus ones. Especially not... She waved a hand vaguely in Clara's direction. Plus ones that take up so much room. Clara felt the heat rise in her cheeks. It wasn't just the insult. It was the fact that Gavin was considering it. She saw the calculation in his eyes. Clara, Gavin said, turning to her, his voice dropping to a whisper. You understand? Right, this is the moment. I need to go in there. You're going to leave me here alone? Clara asked, her voice incredulous. Gavin, I don't know anyone. I'm tired. My feet hurt. Can we just stay for an hour and go? Stop being selfish, he hissed, grabbing her elbow. His grip was hard. This is for us. For the baby. Go sit over there by the buffet. Eat something. You like eating. Right. Just wait for me. I'll be 20 minutes. Gavin. Don't cause a scene, he warned, his eyes dark. Do not make me look bad. Clara. He turned back to Tiffany, his face transforming back into the eager puppy. Lead the way. Tiffany. Clara watched them walk away. Tiffany linked her arm through Gavin's, whispering something in his ear that made him throw his head back and laugh. They disappeared behind a heavy velvet curtain, guarded by two men who looked like ex-military. Clara stood alone in the middle of the swirling party. She felt a tear slide down her cheek and quickly wiped it away. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She made her way to a small, empty table near the catering service entrance. It was hidden behind a large pillar, away from the prying eyes of the elite. She sat down heavily, exhaling as she took the weight off her feet. A waiter, an older man with kind eyes, paused as he passed. Sparkling water with lime. Mum, you look like you could use it. Please, Clara whispered. He handed her the glass. Rough night. You have no idea, she said. She sat there for 40 minutes. 40 minutes of watching the clock. 40 minutes of feeling the baby kick. A rhythmic reminder of the life she was protecting. She took out her phone. No texts from Gavin. She decided to go to the restroom to splash water on her face. As she stood up, a wave of dizziness hit her. She stumbled slightly, grabbing the tablecloth. At that exact moment, the velvet curtains of the VIP section opened. Gavin and Tiffany walked out, accompanied by an older man, Tiffany's father. Mr. St. Clair. They were laughing. Gavin saw Clara. He saw her stumble. And instead of rushing over, he looked annoyed. He said something to Mr. St. Clair, pointed at Clara, and rolled his eyes. He was making a joke of it. He was distancing himself. Clara's heart shattered. She began to walk toward him, determined to tell him she was leaving. With or without him, she was done. As she passed a waiter, carrying a tray of champagne flutes, Tiffany stepped out. It was subtle, a slight movement of her hip, a nudge of her elbow, but it was enough. She bumped into the waiter. The waiter stumbled. The tray tipped. A cascade of champagne and crystal rained down on Clara. The crash was deafening. Clara gasped, as the cold liquid soaked her dress, the glass shattering around her ankles. She stood frozen, covered in alcohol and shards, the center of attention of the entire ballroom. The music stopped. The chatter died. "Oh my God," Tiffany shrieked, her voice dripping with fake concern that barely masked her amusement. "She's so clumsy, Gavin. Isn't that your wife?" Gavin's face turned a deep shade of crimson. Not out of anger at Tiffany, but out of shame. He stormed over to Clara, his shoes crunching on the glass. "What is wrong with you?" he shouted, his voice echoing in the silent hall. Clara looked up at him, water dripping from her eyelashes. "Gavin!" She pushed the "Shut up!" Gavin roared. "Look at this mess. Look at you. You're a disaster. Clara, I bring you to one nice event, one important night, and you ruin it. You're drunk. I'm pregnant." Clara screamed back, her voice finally finding its strength. "I haven't had a drop. You're a burden," Gavin yelled, pointing a finger in her face. The crowd gasped. "I should have listened to everyone. I should have never married a nobody. You're nothing. Clara, nothing. You're just a millstone around my neck, dragging me down." He turned to Mr. Saint. "Claire," hands held up in apology. "I am so sorry, sir. I'll have her removed immediately. She's not well." Clara stood there, shaking. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing the air out of her lungs. She looked around the room, seeing the sneers, the pity, the cell phones raised to record the freak out. She was alone, completely and utterly alone. Or so she thought. Outside, the rhythmic thrum of rotors cut through the night air. The sound grew louder, vibrating the windows of the ballroom. It wasn't a standard police chopper. It was the heavy, low-frequency thrum of military-grade transport. Then, the massive double doors at the far end of the ballroom, the doors reserved for heads of state, burst open. They didn't just open. They were kicked open. The wind from the rotors outside swirled into the room, extinguishing the candles near the entrance. 3 men stood in the doorway. They were dressed in black suits that absorbed the light. They didn't look like the soft, doughy businessmen in the room. They looked like predators. The man in the center was tall, with shoulders that strained against his bespoke jacket. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow and eyes the color of ice. It was Sebastian Hawthorne, the billionaire recluse who owned half of the tech infrastructure in the Western Hemisphere. To his left was Harrison Hawthorne, the ruthless CEO of Hawthorne Global, known for dismantling companies for sport. To his right was Alexander Hawthorne, the youngest, a playboy with a smile that could hide 1,000 daggers. The room went deathly silent. Even Mr. Saint. Claire looked pale. The Hawthornes were not just rich, they were American royalty. They were the kind of money that owned the banks, that owned the banks. Gavin frowned, confused. Who? Sebastian Hawthorne stepped into the room. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at Mr. Saint. Claire! His eyes locked onto the soaking wet, trembling pregnant woman standing in the broken glass. "Clara," Sebastian said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the room like a thunderclap. Gavin laughed nervously. You know my wife." Sebastian ignored him. He walked forward, his brothers flanking him. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, terrified to even brush against their sleeves. They stopped 3 feet from Clara. Sebastian looked at the glass on the floor. Then he looked at the champagne soaking her cheap dress. Then he looked at Gavin. "Wife?" Sebastian asked, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Is that what you call her?" Yes, Gavin stammered, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, but too arrogant to understand the danger. I was just handling her. She's a bit of a mess. I apologize for the interruption. Mr. Hawthorne, I'm Gavin Reynolds, Senior VP at Harrison. Hawthorne stepped forward, cutting Gavin off. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief made of silk. He gently, tenderly, wiped a spot of champagne from Clara's cheek. "Hello, little sister," Harrison said softly. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Gavin's face went slack. "Sister." Clara looked up at Harrison, her lip trembling. "Harry," she whispered, "I told you not to come. You triggered the distress beacon on your watch." "Clara," Alexander said, stepping up to her other side and wrapping a heavy, warm coat around her shoulders. "Did you think we wouldn't come?" "He called you a nothing," Sebastian said, his eyes never leaving Gavin's face. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "He stood there and called a Hawthorne nothing." Sebastian took one step toward Gavin. Gavin stumbled back, tripping over his own feet. "You have 3 seconds to explain why my sister is crying," Sebastian whispered, "before I buy this hotel and throw you off the roof of it." The silence in the Pierre's grand ballroom was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes an execution. 500 pairs of eyes that had, moments ago, been filled with derision and pity were now wide with a mixture of terror and confusion. Gavin Reynolds stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile 2 impossible realities. On one hand, there was Clara, his mousy, thrift store shopping, coupon-clipping wife who cried over sad commercials. On the other, there stood the Hawthorne brothers, the Titan, the Wolf, and the Prince of Wall Street, and they had just called her sister. I don't understand," Gavin stammered, his voice cracking. He looked from Sebastian's icy glare to Clara, who was weeping silently into the lapel of Harrison's coat. "Clara, what is going on? You told me your family was... You said they were dead." Clara pulled away from Harrison slightly, wiping her eyes. She looked at Gavin, really looked at him, for the first time in months. She didn't see the ambitious visionary he claimed to be. She saw a small, frightened man in a cheap suit. "I said they were gone to me. Gavin," Clara whispered, her voice hoarse. "I left them because I wanted to find someone who loved me for me. Not for the Hawthorne name, not for the billions, just for Clara." A ripple of gasps tore through the crowd. The Clara Hawthorne, the lost heiress who had vanished from the social register 5 years ago. Rumors had swirled that she was in a Swiss sanitarium, or that she had joined a convent. No one guessed she was living in a walk-up in Queens, clipping coupons. Gavin's face drained of color. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The charity case he had been berating, the woman he had treated like an anchor dragging him down, was worth more than the entire room combined. You lied to me," Gavin whispered, a sudden, desperate anger rising in him. He was trying to flip the script, to make himself the victim. "You deceived me. This is entrapment. Entrapment." Alexander laughed. It was a dark, terrifying sound. He stepped forward, casually unbuttoning his tuxedo jacket to reveal the custom holster of a firearm he was licensed to carry, though he didn't reach for it. The threat was in his posture. "You think this is a court of law? Reynolds, you think you get a defense?" "She lied," Gavin shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Clara. "She watched me struggle, She watched me work 18-hour days to pay our rent while she sat on a fortune. Do you know how sick that is? She watched you change, Sebastian interjected, his voice low and vibrating with suppressed rage. She gave you a gift, you idiot, the gift of a clean slate. She wanted to build a life with you from the ground up. And what did you do? Sebastian took another step. He was now nose to nose with Gavin. You broke her spirit. We have the reports, the insults, the emotional neglect, the way you made her feel small so you could feel big. Sebastian gestured to the shattered glass on the floor. And tonight, you let her stand in broken glass while you flirted with that. He didn't look at Tiffany Street, Claire, but he pointed a finger in her direction. Tiffany, who had been watching with her mouth agape, suddenly realized she was in the line of fire. She tried to muster her usual arrogance. Excuse me, I am Tiffany Street. Claire, my father is bankrupt, Harrison said flatly, not even looking at her. He pulled a sleek black phone from his pocket and tapped the screen. As of 30 seconds ago, Mr. St. Clair, who had been hiding behind his daughter. Choked. What did you say? Hawthorne Global just acquired the majority debt of St. Clair Industries, Harrison said, looking at his phone with a bored expression. We called in the loans, all of them, effective immediately. You're leveraged 10 to 1. St. Clair, you're finished. You can't do that. Mr. St. Clair shrieked, clutching his chest. I just did, Harrison replied. Consider it a fee for the distress your daughter caused my sister. The room spun. In less than 2 minutes, the Hawthorns had destroyed a legacy family just to make a point. Gavin looked around wildly. He saw the shift. The people who had been laughing at Clara were now looking at him with disgust. He was a dead man walking, but desperation makes people do stupid things. He lunged for Clara. Clara, wait, he yelled, reaching for her arm. Baby, please, I was stressed. It's the merger. You know I love you. I did this for us. Before his fingers could even graze the fabric of her coat, Alexander moved. It was a blur of motion. One moment, Alexander was standing still. The next, he had twisted Gavin's arm behind his back and slammed him face first onto a banquet table. Plates shattered. Silverware clattered to the floor. Gavin screamed in pain. Don't! Alexander whispered into Gavin's ear, tightening the hold until Gavin's shoulder joint popped ominously. Touch! Her! Alex, let him go, Clara said softly. She sounded exhausted. Please, I just want to leave. Alexander hesitated, then shoved Gavin away with a sneer. Gavin crumpled to the floor, holding his shoulder, sobbing into the carpet. Clara stepped forward. She looked down at the man she had married, the man she was carrying a child for. I wanted to tell you tonight. Gavin, she said, her voice trembling but clear. My trust fund unlocks tomorrow, my 30th birthday. I was going to tell you everything. I was going to buy us a house. I was going to give you the capital to start your own firm. Gavin looked up, his eyes widening in horror at what he had lost. Clara. No, please. But you couldn't wait, she said, tears finally spilling over. You couldn't just be kind for one night. You chose the facade. Gavin, you chose the illusion of wealth over the reality of love. She reached into her purse, the cheap, worn purse he hated, and pulled out a plain gold band. She dropped it. It landed with a dull clink next to his face on the carpet. I'm done, she said. Clara! Gavin screamed as she turned away. Think about the baby. You can't take my child. Sebastian stopped. He turned back one last time. "You don't have a child," Sebastian said coldly. "You have a lawsuit and a restraining order. If you ever come within 500 feet of her or my niece, I won't buy your company. Gavin, I will buy the ground you walk on and evict you from the planet." Sebastian wrapped his arm around Clara's shoulders. "Let's go home. Clara." They walked out, the three brothers forming a phalanx around their sister. The crowd parted, heads bowed, terrified and awed. Behind them, Gavin Reynolds lay amidst the ruin of his own making, sobbing as the cameras of the elite flashed, capturing every second of his downfall. The helicopter ride was silent, save for the rhythmic thrum of the blades and the static of the pilot's headset. Manhattan sprawled below them, a grid of glittering lights that felt 1,000,000 miles away from the darkness in Clara's heart. She sat strapped into the leather bucket seat of the Sikorsky S-76, wrapped in Alexander's cashmere coat. Her hands were resting on her belly, trembling. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, replaced by a crushing, numbing grief. She hadn't wanted this. She hadn't wanted a scene. She hadn't wanted to destroy Gavin. She had just wanted him to love her. "Here," Harrison said, handing her a bottle of water. It wasn't the cheap plastic kind. It was a glass bottle of heavy, mineral-rich water. Even the hydration in her brother's world was different. "Drink. You're shaking." "I ruined his life," Clara whispered, staring out the window. "He ruined his own life," Sebastian said from the seat opposite her. He was typing furiously on a tablet, the blue light illuminating his sharp features. "We just accelerated the timeline. You didn't have to bankrupt the St. Clair's," Clara said. "That was excessive." "They humiliated a hawthorn," Alexander said, leaning back with his eyes closed. "In public. There are taxes for that. Clara, they paid the tax." Clara closed her eyes. This was why she had left. The ruthlessness, the transactional nature of everything. In the Hawthorne world, feelings were liabilities and revenge was an asset class. The helicopter banked, descending toward the Hawthorne estate in the Hamptons. It was a sprawling compound on the ocean, a fortress of limestone and glass that Clara hadn't seen in 5 years. As they landed on the private pad, a medical team was already waiting. "Is this necessary?" Clara asked, as the door slid open and a nurse stepped forward with a wheelchair. "You're high risk. You've been under extreme emotional distress, and you've been on your feet for 4 hours in cheap shoes," Sebastian said, his tone brokering no argument. "Yes, it's necessary." Clara allowed herself to be wheeled into the main house. It was beautiful, cold, and immaculate. The foyer was exactly as she remembered it, a double helix staircase, a chandelier that cost more than Gavin's life earnings, and silence. They took her to the East Wing, which had been converted into a temporary maternity ward. An obstetrician, Dr. Aris Thorne, one of the best in the country, was waiting. "Heart rate is elevated." "Doctor," Thorne murmured, moving the transducer over Clara's belly. The whoosh-whoosh of the baby's heartbeat filled the room. "Blood pressure is 150/95. That's too high. Clara, you need absolute bed rest. No stress. No phones." "Did you hear that?" Sebastian said from the doorway. He had shed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, looking less like a titan of industry and more like a worried big brother. "Hand over the phone. Clara." "I need to see if he calls," Clara said, clutching her cracked iPhone. "He has called," Harrison said, walking in. 47 times in the last hour. He's also left 12 voicemails, ranging from begging to threatening legal action. I need to hear them, she said. No, Sebastian said gently. He walked over and took the phone from her hand. You need to sleep. We will handle Gavin. You don't understand, Clara pleaded, tears leaking from her eyes again. He wasn't always like this. When we met, he was sweet. He brought me soup when I was sick. He listened to me. Predators are always patient when they are setting the trap, Alexander said. Leaning against the wall. He didn't know who I was. Clara insisted. That proves it was real. He couldn't have been using me for money because he thought I was poor. The three brothers exchanged a look. A heavy, silent communication passed between them. Sebastian sighed. He pulled a chair up to the bedside and sat down, taking Clara's hand. Clara, he began, his voice dropping an octave. We didn't want to tell you this tonight. We wanted to wait until the baby was born. Clara's stomach dropped. Tell me what... Harrison stepped forward, holding a manila folder. He placed it on the duvet covers. We ran a deep background check on Gavin the week you moved in with him, Harrison said. We've been monitoring him for 3 years. You spied on me, Clara asked. Angry. We protected you, Sebastian corrected. And we found something. You're right. Gavin didn't know you were a hawthorn. He did think you were poor. But he didn't marry you for love. Clara. Clara stared at the folder. Then why? Why would he marry a waitress with no money if he's so obsessed with status? Because, Alexander said softly. He needed a clean record. Clara opened the folder. The first page was a mugshot, a younger Gavin. Gavin Reynolds isn't his real name, Sebastian explained as Clara scanned the documents. His name is Gavin Rourke. 10 years ago, he was involved in an embezzlement scheme in Chicago. He turned state's witness to avoid jail time, but his reputation was torched. He changed his name, moved to New York, and tried to restart. He needed a wife who was safe, Harrison continued. Someone with no connections, no family, no ability to dig into his past. Someone grateful. He picked you because he thought you were weak. Clara. He thought you were a nobody who would never question him while he used his clean marriage to build a facade of respectability for his new employers. Clara felt sick. She read the transcripts of emails Gavin had sent to his old friends. Found the perfect cover. One email read, dated 2 months before their wedding. She's a mouse. Quiet, no family. Thinks I'm a god. I can do whatever I want, and she'll just bake me a pie. It's the perfect anchor while I climb. Clara put the paper down. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. It was all a lie. Every I love you. Every moment of kindness. It was just maintenance. He was maintaining his cover. He never loved me, Clara whispered. The realization didn't hurt. It incinerated her. It burned away the last remnants of the hope she had been holding on to. He loved the control, Sebastian said. And tonight, when you embarrassed him, you threatened that control. That's why he snapped. Clara laid her head back against the pillows. She felt hollowed out. I want to sleep now. We'll be right outside, Sebastian said. He kissed her forehead. You're safe here. Clara, the gates are locked. The guards are armed. No one gets to you. The brothers left the room, the heavy oak door clicking shut. Out in the hallway, the atmosphere changed instantly. The concern vanished, replaced by a cold, hard military precision. Status on Reynolds, Sebastian asked, walking briskly down the hall. He's currently at a bar on 3rd Avenue, Alexander reported, checking his phone. Drinking heavily. He's telling anyone who will listen that we kidnapped his wife. Is the legal team ready? Injunctions are filed. The annulment papers are being drafted based on fraud regarding his identity. We can have the marriage dissolved by morning. Harrison said. Good, Sebastian said. He stopped at the top of the stairs and looked out the massive window at the dark ocean. But that's not enough. What do you have in mind? Alexander asked, a wicked glint in his eye. He likes to climb, Sebastian said. He likes status. He likes to be seen. Sebastian turned to his brothers. Let's make him the most famous man in New York tomorrow morning. Release the audio. Harrison raised an eyebrow. The audio from the car. The bug we planted in the BMW. Everything, Sebastian said. The way he spoke to her. The insults about her body. The admission that he was using her. Leak it to every news outlet, every blog, every social media platform. By noon, I want Gavin Reynolds to be unable to order a coffee in this city without being spat on. And the debt? Harrison asked. He has about 40,000 in credit card debt he was hiding from Clara. Buy it, Sebastian commanded, and foreclose on everything. His car, his apartment, his watch. I want him on the street. Harrison, literally on the street. With pleasure, Harrison said, tapping his phone. One more thing, Sebastian added, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Find out who invited him to the Pierre tonight. Find out who gave him the idea that he had a shot at the Obsidian Group. It was likely Tiffany, Alexander said. Verify it, Sebastian said. If anyone else played a part in humiliating my sister, I want their heads on a spike next to his. Sebastian looked back at the door to Clara's room. She wanted a fairy tale, he said softly. She got a tragedy. Now, we write the sequel, and this time, the villain doesn't survive. The morning sun hit Gavin Reynolds's face, not like a gentle awakening, but like an interrogation lamp. He groaned, shielding his eyes, the pounding headache behind his temples a rhythmic reminder of the bottle of scotch he had consumed alone in a dive bar on 3rd Avenue. He rolled over in the bed of his apartment, a sterile, overpriced one-bedroom in the financial district that he and Clara could barely afford. He reached for his phone, expecting to see the fallout. He expected angry texts from Clara, maybe a threatening email from a lawyer. What he didn't expect was for his phone to be so hot it was almost burning his hand. 14,000 notifications. Gavin sat up, the room spinning. He tapped the screen. Twitter was trending. The #1 hashtag in New York City wasn't the Knicks, and it wasn't the weather. It was #MonsterHusband. Confused. Gavin clicked the tag. The first video was a repost from a gossip site called The Manhattan Lens. It had 4 million views in 6 hours. The video was static, just a black screen with audio waveforms moving, but the voice was unmistakable. It was his voice, crystal clear, high fidelity. I can't afford to look like I'm married to a charity case. Image is currency. Clara. You walk in there looking like a suburban housewife who got lost on the way to Target. Gavin's blood turned to ice. It was the conversation in the car, the BMW, the lease. He scrolled down, another clip. Found the perfect cover. She's a mouse, quiet, no family. It's the perfect anchor while I climb. This wasn't just the car audio. This was a voice memo he had recorded for himself months ago, a manifestation journal he kept on his laptop. How did they get this? He looked at the comments. At CityGirl99. I hope this guy rots. Dragging a pregnant woman. Disgusting. at Wall Street Killer. I know this guy, Gavin Reynolds. He's a VP at Stratos Capital. Not for long, I bet. At Karma Police. Wait until you see the video from the Pierre. He literally pushed her into the glass. Gavin threw the covers off and scrambled out of bed. He had to get to the office. He had to spin this. He could claim it was AI generated. He could claim it was a deep fake. He just needed to get in front of the board before they saw it. He showered in 2 minutes, cut himself shaving, and threw on his second-best suit because the best one was ruined with champagne and floor wax. He ran out of the building, hailing a cab. The driver looked at him in the rearview mirror, eyes narrowing. "You look familiar," the driver said, his tone unfriendly. "Just drive," Gavin snapped. "Stratos Capital, Midtown." When he arrived at the glass and steel tower of Stratos Capital, the lobby was unusually quiet. He strode toward the elevators, swiping his badge. Beep. Access denied. He swiped again. Access denied. "There must be a glitch," Gavin muttered, looking around for the security guard, Ralph, whom he usually ignored. "Ralph, my card isn't working." Ralph didn't look up from his desk. He just pointed to a cardboard box sitting on the counter. "Mr. Reynolds," Ralph said, his voice devoid of any respect. "You're not allowed up. Management sent this down." Gavin stared at the box. It was a standard banker's box. Inside, he could see a few of his personal items, his stress ball, a framed photo of himself shaking hands with a senator, and his stapler. "This is a mistake," Gavin said, his voice rising. "I am a senior vice president. Get the managing partner on the phone." "The managing partner is currently giving a statement to the press, distancing the firm from your behavior," Ralph said, finally looking him in the eye. "You're fired for cause, Mr. Reynolds. Breach of the morality clause in your contract. And since you're fired for cause, your unvested stock options are cancelled." "They can't do that!" Gavin screamed, grabbing the box. "I'll sue. Do you know who my wife is?" The lobby went silent. People waiting for the elevator turned to look. "We know who she is," a woman in a business suit said, stepping forward. It was the HR director. "She's the woman you abused, and her family's legal team has already contacted us. If we don't terminate you, they've threatened to buy the building and turn it into a parking lot." Gavin staggered back. The Hawthorns. They were dismantling him piece by piece. He turned and ran out of the building, clutching his box. He needed an ally. He needed Tiffany Street. Claire. She was there. She saw everything. She could testify that Clara was being hysterical. He pulled out his phone and dialed Tiffany. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." He tried her work number. A receptionist answered. "St. Clair Industries, Liquidation Department." "Liquidation?" Gavin choked out. "I need to speak to Tiffany." "Ms. St. Clair is not taking calls," the receptionist said. "The assets are being frozen. If you are a creditor, please hold. If you are a personal friend, please stop calling. She is currently dealing with the FBI regarding insider trading allegations that surfaced this morning." Gavin hung up. The FBI. The Hawthorns hadn't just bankrupted the St. Clairs. They had dug up their dirty laundry and handed it to the feds. He was alone. Completely alone. He decided to go home. He would regroup. He would find a lawyer who wasn't afraid of the Hawthorns. He would fight this. He took the subway back to his apartment, keeping his head down. When he got to his door, his key didn't turn. There was a piece of paper taped to the wood. Eviction notice. Reason: failure to pay rent. Lease violation: criminal activity. "I paid the rent," Gavin shouted at the door. He pounded on it. "I paid it yesterday." The door to the neighbor's apartment opened. Mrs. Gable, an elderly woman who usually baked cookies, looked out. She held a can of pepper spray. "Get out of here, Gavin," she said, her voice shaking. "The landlord saw the news. He doesn't want trouble. He said your payment bounced because your accounts are frozen." Gavin checked his banking app. Account balance minus $420,000. Status frozen. Court order Hawthorne versus Reynolds. They had frozen his accounts. They had evicted him. They had fired him. They had turned the entire city against him. Gavin Reynolds slid down the door of his locked apartment. Sitting on the dirty hallway floor next to his box of office supplies, he put his head in his hands. It wasn't just a breakup. It was an erasure. 3 months had passed since the night at the Pierre. The winter snow lay thick over the Hawthorne estate in the Hamptons, turning the grounds into a silent, white palace. Inside, the atmosphere was warm, smelling of cedarwood and lavender. Clara sat in the sunroom, wrapped in a blanket, painting. It was the first time she had picked up a brush in years. Gavin had always told her painting was a waste of time, a hobby for people who don't contribute to the economy. Now, she was painting the ocean, stormy, grey, but with a sliver of gold breaking through the clouds. "It's good," a voice said. Clara looked up. It was Sebastian. He was leaning against the doorframe, holding 2 mugs of herbal tea. He looked tired. The war to destroy Gavin had taken time and energy, but he had done it with the efficiency of a machine. "It's messy," Clara said, smiling faintly. "But it feels like me." "How are you feeling?" Sebastian asked, sitting down and handing her the tea. "Heavy," she admitted, rubbing her belly. She was close, 38 weeks, and guilty. Guilty. Sebastian frowned. "Clara, the man was a sociopath. You have nothing to be guilty about." "Not about him," Clara said, looking out at the snow. "About you, and Harry, and Alex. You dropped everything for me. You spent millions destroying him. I feel like I'm still a burden, just in a different way." Sebastian's face softened. He reached out and covered her hand with his. "Clara, when Mum and Dad died, I promised I would protect you. I failed for 3 years because I let you run away. I'm not saving you because it's a job. I'm saving you because you're my sister, and because you're the only decent person in this family." Clara squeezed his hand. "He's still trying to call. Isn't he? I see the blocked logs." "He's desperate," Sebastian said dismissively. "He's living in a motel in Jersey. He's trying to sell his story to the tabloids, but no one will print it because we threatened to pull advertising from any publication that gives him a platform. He's ghosted." Suddenly, Clara gasped. The mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. "Clara!" Sebastian stood up instantly. She gripped her stomach, her face going white. "Seb, something's wrong." Another pain ripped through her, sharper this time. She doubled over. "Harrison, Alex!" Sebastian roared, his voice echoing through the massive house. Within seconds, the brothers were there. The private medical team that had been living in the guest wing rushed in. "Her blood pressure is spiking, Doctor," Thorne shouted, checking the monitors. 180 over 110. It's pre-eclampsia. Severe. We need to move. Now. The next hour was a blur of terrified chaos. The helicopter was prepped. They flew her not to a regular hospital, but to the private wing of Mount Sinai in the city, where the Hawthorns had endowed the entire maternity floor. Clara was fading in and out of consciousness. The pain was blinding. She felt the cold gel of the ultrasound, heard the frantic beeping of machines. "The baby is in distress." "Doctor," Thorne's voice floated through the haze. "Heart rate is dropping. We have to do an emergency C-section. Get the brothers out." "I'm not leaving her," Alexander yelled, struggling with a nurse. "Get out, or she dies." "Doctor," Thorne commanded. The doors swung shut. Clara was alone under the bright lights. She looked up at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she prayed. "Take everything. Take the money. Take the name. Just let him live. Let my baby live." Outside in the waiting room, the three Hawthorne brothers paced like caged tigers. They owned half the city, but they couldn't buy their way out of this. They were helpless. Harrison was on the phone, barking orders to distract himself. "I don't care. Buy the ventilator company if you have to. Just make sure she has the best equipment." Alexander was sitting on the floor, head in his hands. 2 hours passed. Then, the doors opened. "Doctor." Thorne stepped out. He looked exhausted. His scrubs were stained. The brothers froze. "She's stable, Doctor," Thorne said, exhaling. "It was touch and go. She lost a lot of blood, but she's going to make it." "And the baby?" Sebastian asked, his voice trembling. "Doctor." Thorne smiled. "A boy, 5 pounds, 6 ounces, small, but a fighter. He's in the NICU, but he's strong." The relief in the room was palpable. Harrison slumped against the wall. Alexander started laughing, a hysterical release of tension. Sebastian walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. He pulled out his phone. He had one notification, a text from an unknown number. It was Gavin. "I know she's in labor. I saw the chopper. I have rights. I'm the father. Let me see my son." Sebastian stared at the text. His eyes hardened. The fear was gone, replaced by the cold resolve of the patriarch. He typed a reply. "You have no son. You have a DNA test pending that will prove you are a fraud. Step foot in this hospital, and the police waiting in the lobby will arrest you for violating your restraining order. Goodbye. Gavin." He blocked the number. Inside the recovery room, Clara woke up. She felt groggy, sore, and weak, but there was a warmth in her arms. A nurse was gently placing a small bundle wrapped in a blue blanket against her chest. Clara looked down. The baby had dark hair and eyes that were already trying to open. He didn't look like Gavin. He looked like her father. "Hi," she whispered, touching his tiny cheek. "I'm your mum. We're going to be okay. No one is ever going to hurt you." The door opened softly. Her 3 brothers walked in. They looked at the baby with a reverence they usually reserved for rare art or stock market crashes. "What's his name?" Harrison asked softly. Clara looked at her brothers, the men who had saved her, the men who had stood in the fire for her. "Leo," she said. "His name is Leo, after our dad." Sebastian smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached his eyes. "Leo Hawthorne. It has a good ring to it." "Not Reynolds?" Alexander asked. Clara looked at the baby. "No. No more Reynolds. We're starting over." 1 year later, the flashing lights of the Met Gala red carpet didn't blind Clara. They illuminated her. She stepped out of the limousine not as a victim, but as the chairwoman of the Hawthorne Foundation, draped in midnight blue velvet and wearing the family's legendary sapphire necklace. Sebastian, Harrison, and Alexander flanked her, no longer her protectors, but her royal guard. As she ascended the stairs, a commotion at the barricades halted the press. A gaunt man in an ill-fitting waiter's uniform was trying to push through security. "Clara, please, it's me." It was Gavin. The man who had once treated her like a stain was now begging for her attention, his face lined with the stress of a year spent in financial ruin. He had lost everything: his job, his reputation, his pride. Clara signaled security to wait. She walked to the velvet rope, looking down at him with a calm, terrifying indifference. "I have rights," Gavin rasped, eyes darting between her diamonds and his worn shoes. "I'm Leo's father. I'm living in a basement. Clara, I'm starving. You can't just erase me." "I didn't erase you, Gavin," Clara said softly. "You erased yourself the moment you chose a facade over a family." "I can change," he pleaded, reaching a dirty hand toward her. "Just give me a chance, or a loan. Anything, for old time's sake." Clara stared at his outstretched hand. She didn't feel anger anymore. She felt nothing. Slowly, she opened her diamond-encrusted clutch and pulled out a crisp $20 bill. She tucked it into the pocket of his cheap jacket. "Get yourself something to eat," she whispered, her voice devoid of warmth. "And try not to make a scene. It's bad for your image." Without looking back, she turned and walked up the grand staircase, her brothers laughing as they followed her into the light, leaving Gavin Reynolds standing alone in the rain, clutching the only thing he was worth. The story of Clara and Gavin isn't just a tale of revenge. It's a mirror held up to the fragile nature of status. Gavin built his house on the sand of perception, believing that money and titles were the only things that mattered. He didn't realize that the true currency of life is loyalty and love. In his desperate climb to the top, he kicked away the only ladder he had, not realizing it was made of solid gold. Clara's journey from a trembling victim to a queen of industry reminds us that sometimes. You have to be completely broken before you can rebuild yourself into something unbreakable. The Hawthorns didn't just win, they redefined the game. Wow, what a journey from the shattered glass of the Pierre Hotel to the steps of the Met Gala. Clara's transformation is the ultimate comeback story. If you felt that satisfaction when she handed him that $20 bill, hit that like button. What would you have done if you were Clara? Would you have forgiven him? Or was her revenge perfect? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories of betrayal, billionaire brothers, and sweet, sweet justice, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for listening, and remember, be careful who you step on your way up.